Before I forget, I've got some good news on Common Space memberships. For anyone who said that they were interested in the memberships on the forum, we are able to fully sponsor the cost of the memberships. So that will be available at no cost to you guys. We will get the invoice from them in the next couple days and then be sending out some invites. So you're going to get an email from Latch. LATCH is the name of like the access system that Common Space uses. When you get invited to Latch, they will give you like a randomly generated door code that changes every day. You'll use that door code to get into Common Space, and then it's kind of an honor system. So if you said that you were interested in the 12 p.m. to 9 p.m. access, that's the level that we're paying for. If you said that you were interested in the 24/7 access, that's also the level we're paying for you guys. So that will be available to you for the course of the program. And then they tend to offer some kind of like ongoing rate special kind of deal if you want to continue your Common Space membership after the cohort completes. So those emails, I'll probably get that set up tomorrow. So that will be going out to you. I can't remember if it's a text message or an email for the Latch app, but that will be going out, if not tomorrow, very early next week. And then you guys are welcome to use those memberships just based off of the responses that you gave us on the form. With all of that said, let's dive into stand-up. What did we learn yesterday?
We learned about bootstraps.
We learned about Bootstrap. What did we learn about Bootstrap? Why do we use Bootstrap?
To use pre-made blocks of code.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's basically a way for us to be able to use CSS classes that we don't have to build or create ourselves. Definitely with rows and columns, right? And the container is the third one that we've seen so far. We can have different column sizes, and we started seeing that a little bit with the weather app. We also learned about that horizontal rule line, how to get that line across. We also played with some CSS properties. What are some CSS properties that we used yesterday?
Div, like a div container.
We used a div. That's not a CSS property. That is an HTML element, but then we use those divs to apply CSS properties to them. So border radius, yep. Jen threw out rounding the corners. Margin we used, yep, to kind of push that entire container down. And then padding, right? Padding is how we got the content inside of it to give it a little bit more breathing room as well. Anything else?
Would container be one?
Container is not a CSS property, but it is a CSS class that Bootstrap provides to us. So definitely a concept that we use. A little bit later on, we'll be learning about container fluid, which basically makes the container go to the full width of the page. But one really nice thing about the container is that it's mobile responsive, and we'll be learning about responsive design as we go. But basically, if you load up our weather app on a smaller screen, that container is going to fill that whole size of the screen. But as we get onto much bigger displays, the content is going to only get so big, and then it will be centered in that display and have some white space and padding around it. We learned the grid systems, all about the 12 columns, and then Jen threw out the whole preview tool, right? How we spent some time planning out, taking our mock-up and breaking that down into columns, right? And rows, drawing the divs, playing around with different colors just to make sure that we've got a visual plan, and then we can take that and go right into our code and code it all out. We ended up with our code yesterday getting 3 or 4 levels in our divs, right? And that's really easy to get lost in. So we used our comments to keep track of that code side, but that's really where that planning is helpful, right? It's one thing to use a tool like Figma to create a mockup like that, but sometimes taking that mockup and diving right into our code is still a step too far, right? And so using preview, going in and breaking that down into rectangles makes it much easier for us to track the divs and get them all created. So the good news is that we'll be doing that on all of our projects for the rest of this cohort. Anytime that we start on a new project, we're going to have that mock-up, right? We're going to have, or a screenshot, we're going to have something that we know what our end goal is and what we're working towards. And then we're going to break that down, right? And that's the whole process of engineering, breaking down that complex project into more manageable pieces. So we'll go through, we'll use the preview tool, we'll get all of our rectangles there, and then it becomes much easier in our code to get the layout done before we load up any of that content or do the additional styling. Anything else from yesterday that resonated? Did anyone have any light bulb moments?
I think for me, actually seeing like when you taught us the thing about the numbers for the columns, like actually being able to see it come on the web page was really like amazing to me. I finally felt like, oh, I could do this. Like it's not as hard as I thought it was. And I was getting like mixed up with like terminology, but then I was thinking like, take a step back and kind of like reevaluate and like go through like previous codes that we have done and try to like think about it in that way. So I think that was very like helpful. So I finally had that light bulb moment, like I could do this.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And I think what's really empowering too, I know someone shared you see me do it and you can follow along with me and you get the output, but then you're like, well, I could never do that on my own, right? And that's the real challenge of the homework. But sometimes you get that light bulb moment not while you're doing it, but then when you go back through the code and you say, all right, maybe I don't need to watch the 3-hour video on YouTube. Maybe I'm just going to go through the code and kind of do that reverse engineering, right? Figure out, all right, why did we need another div here? How did we figure out this div was going in another div? How did we know that that was a col 6 that we were going to put in? All of that kind of stuff. It's very easy to get lost in it as we're doing it, but then when you get to that final product, sometimes it's easier to pull it apart and understand it there as well. So that can be a good technique. The other thing I will say is I will start posting my copy of the code at the end of every class. And so it's great for you to have your code and follow along, but sometimes all you want is the code from class, and when class ends, the live share ends, right? And you can't just go to the live share and see that code. So I will start posting up my code on a site called GitHub, and then we will learn a little bit later on about how you guys can put your code on GitHub and have that accessible as well. So I will share that link at the end of class tonight or right after it. And that will have a copy of the My Code folder that I work out of. And you'll be able to see day over day the progress that we're working on there. And Jen, definitely, yes. Now that we've got divs, right, we've kind of unlocked a new level of understanding or of power that we have, right? Where we can start seeing, all right, divs and divs and divs, that Russian doll, that nesting concept. Sometimes you get into a website and there are like 19 divs and you're like way overwhelmed with it and you're like, where do I even start? But as soon as you start kind of breaking that down and just looking at pieces of it and going, all right, this one div has everything for that top row of the weather app. Or as we keep on going, you'll see that there's one div for the whole nav bar. And if you kind of just focus on that one div and forget about the rest of the site, all of a sudden that code becomes a little bit more readable, a little bit more understandable, because we're only looking at parts of it. So glad to see light bulbs are clicking here. To give you a preview of where we're headed, we were actually a little ahead of schedule, which has never happened to me in any of the 5 cohorts we've taught in. So this is good. We are going to finish up our weather app project. That is certainly going to take us at least half the class to finish. We're going to get all of our content loaded in. We're going to get it all styled up. We're going to do a quick rundown of, hey, now that we're done with this code, it's not enough to just get it working. We need to get to that level of understanding. So we're going to go through and add in additional comments to our code to make sure we understand why it's in, why the divs are the way they are, why we wrote the CSS, what's that impacting, all of that good stuff. Once we get to that level, I think if we have time, we can get a jump start on our project for next week, which is a news website. We're going to go through the mock-up. We're going to go through the preview steps again, outlining all of our divs. We'll probably get those files set up, and then I'm hoping that there's a little bit of time at the end of class for you guys to work on your homework. And if any questions pop up, if anyone needs help, we'll stick around for 15 to 30 minutes, but I might be being a little overly ambitious there. We'll see how long it takes us to finish the weather website, and then we'll kind of balance out the news site with giving you guys time to get a jump start on your homeworks. Any concerns, any roadblocks, any questions? Your PEX card should have been coming in the mail. If you don't have it yet, it should be coming soon. No funds are loaded onto it. That shouldn't stop you from activating it, though. And then those funds will be dispersed, I think, the second Friday in May, based off of attendance and all that good stuff. Glad to see some of you guys are starting to get it. If you don't have it by, I want to say, Monday, shoot me a message and we'll figure out what we can do there. But looks like everyone has started to get theirs in the mail, which is good. Beautiful. Did anyone else's PEX registration ask for an access code? Were you able to get past the access code? We have one student struggling with receiving the access code, and I didn't need it for some reason when I did my test card. Was the access code like emailed to you, or? Yeah, I'm guessing the people who got the link, to set up their card towards the beginning of the week. Then an email will come yet. Danny, did you get that email or no? Okay. Let me reach out to PEX support about that. And figure out what those access codes are. What I will say is try calling the 866 number on the sticker on the card. If you call that number, they just ask, I think you hit number 2 and then number 3, and then they ask for the last 4 digits of the card and say the card is active. That will at least let you spend the money on it, but we still want to make sure that you can like sign in online and see the balance of it. So I will figure out what that access code is and then drop a message in the Slack just to make sure that you guys can get past that step. Okay. We ready to dive into code? Any roadblocks, any concerns other than PEX cards? Okay. So we're going to pick up where we left off, but before we dive in, we're going to get into the habit of not only opening our VS Code, but setting up our code file structure so that we can track progress day over day. Because what you're going to find out is as we're working on these projects, by the time we make it to the end of it, there's so much code, it can be overwhelming to like go back and retroactively analyze it. So what we do is every time that we work on a project that spans multiple days, we end up duplicating that day's folder into the new day that we're working on, just so that we can track that progress more easily. So I'm going to head into Finder or open up the My Code folder from my desktop. I'm going to go into week 2. And then in my day 3, I'm going to right click on day 3 and go down to duplicate. Right click again, 2 fingers on your trackpad. Once I hit duplicate, I'm going to right click on this and go down to rename and rename this to day 4. Now I'm going to show you the old school way and a shortcut. We want to get day 4 opened in VS Code. So we could go to VS Code and go to File and down to Open Folder and pick our day 4 and hit Open, and that would be totally fine and would work. Or if you would like a shortcut, if you have VS Code down in your doc, we can avoid having to go through all of those steps by grabbing this D4 folder and dragging it down to the VS Code icon in our doc. When we drop it on that VS Code icon, it will automatically open our VS Code for us exactly in the right folder based off of what we dropped on it. We are also going to go to File, New Window. We are going to go to the Live Share. And remember, you cannot get to Live Share by clicking on the button down here. You want to use Live Share over on the left toolbar. You're going to go into the Join option. From here, you're going to hit Continue as Anonymous down at the bottom. You're going to type in your name. You're going to hit Enter. And then you are going to paste in the URL that I just pasted in the Zoom chat. I'm going to pop open my index and my style.css. I'm going to split the screens. I'm going to finally hit the Go Live button on my version of the code. You should do that on your code, not on my code, but on your code, hit Go Live. That's going to pop open where we left off, which is something like this. And then we are all caught up and ready to dive into code for today. Give everyone a minute, and if anyone needs a step repeated, let me know. You guys rolling into the live share session. Ever think you'd get this comfortable? Remember this time last week, we were all struggling with VS Code, wrestling with folders, and now we're feeling a little bit more comfortable, right? Remember, if you're struggling to get your style.css kind of anchored at the bottom the way I have it, it's easier to double click on the file to open it, and then up when it's in its own tab, right click on that tab and go down to split down. Some people like to split it on the right and have their HTML on the left and the CSS on the right. I would prefer to split it down for these projects. Although as we keep going, as we keep on working on more projects and we have more CSS, I will end up splitting it over to the right to make it a little bit easier as we go. So whatever works for you right now is what's important. Don't forget, you want to hit that Go Live button in the bottom right. We don't want to open it using Finder. We don't want to double click on the Finder. We want to use the Go Live button because that's our live server. Will automatically update as we change our code. And we should be seeing where we left off yesterday like this. Anyone need help before we roll forward here?
Okay, add in the day 4 folder.
Yep. So go to Finder, go to your desktop, go into your My Code, your week 2, and then on day 3, right click on that and go down to duplicate. Then it's going to say D3 copy, right click on that and go to rename and rename that to day 4. And once you have that name to day 4, you can grab that whole folder and drag it down to the VS Code icon in your dock. And when you let go of it on that icon, it will pop open. Rain, for your live share, I would close out of that window, go File, New Window, and then make sure when you join the live share, you're joining it using the icon on the left instead of the live share button at the bottom. Then when you hit the join button, remember, continue as anonymous, enter for your name, and then put in the URL.
Okay, so for the... All right, my day 4 doesn't have the code up there though.
Does your day 3 have the code?
Yeah, and the other one.
So did you right click on day 3 and hit duplicate?
Yes. Okay, so it's in, okay, I think I got it. It's in this one. And then will we start a new file, a new folder?
No, we duplicate day 3, which has our files in that. So we shouldn't have to make anything new other than duplicating the folder.
Okay, see, mine didn't pop up, so I don't know what I done probably did wrong.
Okay, share your screen, let's take a look. And then Rain, I'll come to you next if you're still having issues with the live share. Okay, so I'm going to request remove control here. And you have the whole... Okay, so let's close out of this. We need to do all of this in Finder. None of those steps are in VS Code. So we go desktop, we go to My Code, we go to week 2. I'm going to clear out your day 4 in order to make... See, you don't have any of your code in day 3, which is why it didn't duplicate over. So were you following along yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know where those files were?
There gotta be in day 2.
Nope, this is the code we worked on yesterday, or on day 2, on Tuesday. Nope, and that was day 1. So I'm not quite sure where you were working on your files yesterday.
The thing we created is right here from yesterday. So
But where is that index.html file?
no, that one's not it. That's not it. So I think when I did something last night, I don't.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do just to get you caught up. We are going to close out of this. We're going to go to your day 4, and we're going to open that in your VS Code, which is, where's your VS Code? Oh, over here. Got it. We're going to create 2 files just to get you caught up, index.html and your style.css. And then we're going to use my copy of them just so that you've got a good starting point for today.
Okay.
And Natasha, that might be a good option for you as well. If you're feeling behind on your code for the day 4, you can just go into my live share, go into index and copy the whole thing and then paste it over in your version. And then when you hit go live, it should bring you up to where mine is.
I wonder if I trashed it by accident yesterday when I was trying to clear out a different folder.
It's possible.
Okay. Because I'm like, I know I was following along, so.
Rain, did you get into the live share or do you still need help? Good, cool. And Natasha, are you good for copying the files over? Just open my index.html, select Command A on that code, and then go over to yours and Command V to get my copy in there.
So I'm supposed to have a screen with your code on it right now because I don't have that.
That's the live share step. So file, new window, click on live share on the right, hit the join button, continue as anonymous, enter for your name, and then paste in the link from the Zoom chat.
I did that. I don't know where I put that window. It's probably on a different desktop.
Okay, I would find that. Then from yesterday, I'm also going to pull open our screenshot just so we've got something to reference as we're building. You guys don't have to have this one open. If you want to, you can. It should be down in your downloads folder if you were following along. And if you weren't, it will be in the daily outline from yesterday. Okay, so we're going to dive in here. The sun is coming in and really screwing with my virtual background, so I apologize in advance for whatever my mic stand is flickering in and out of. Okay. Natasha, I just saw you get into the live session, so cool. All right.
Thank you.
So where we left off, we got our layout done. And we got the main styling of that container done, right? This is starting to feel a little bit more like a website. Now that I'm looking at my screenshot, I'm like, all right, first things first, where's that giant icon coming in from? That, believe it or not, is going to use the same trick that we use in Figma. We're going to just use an emoji for that. So I'm going to come over to my code. I'm going to highlight the word icon on line 11. And I'm going to hit Control, Command, and Space. That is going to pull up my emoji picker. And I am going to type in cloud. And I can pick whatever cloud that I would like here. But I'm going to pick the first one. And that put in some tiny little emoji in my code. And if I hit the Save button here, I come back over to my browser and I got a cute, tiny little cloud. Remember, highlight the word icon, Control, Command, and Space. Let go of all 3. Then go type in cloud or find whatever emoji you would like to use for the current weather conditions. Double click on that. That will put the emoji in. And then when we save our file and go back over to the browser, we should see our cloud. Now, I've got my cloud in there, but it's teeny tiny. I know that I want to adjust that in my CSS, but the problem is I've got this div class col2. If I adjust that col2, it's going to make my temp change and my details change. So I can't just come down here and grab the col2 and start making changes to it, because that's going to change way too much. What do we want to do in our HTML so that we can modify the styling in our CSS?
We need to give them a class or something.
A class, or even better,
ID.
an ID. And the ID is better in this particular situation because it's unique. There's only going to be one thing that we're trying to target here. If we wanted a bunch of different things to be bigger, then we would want to use a class. So we're going to use an ID on here, and the ID that I'm going to add is called weather icon. Now, keep in mind, casing is very, very important here. I put a capital I right here. That means that when I come down to my CSS, I also need to use a capital I. But I'm using an ID up here. Because it is an ID down here, I need to put in the pound sign, the shift 3. Now I can put in my weather icon. And for my weather icon, I can use a font size because oddly emojis are just considered font or text. And I'm going to pick 48 pixels. So I save that, and now I've got my nice cloud. Pausing there, if anyone has their code in and does not have a much larger cloud or whatever icon you picked, go ahead and raise your hand, but I'll give everyone just a moment to catch up there. Remember, we not only had to add the cloud, we put our ID in up here of weather icon, and then we were able to use that ID as our selector in our CSS, and then applied the styling directly to that. Osmo, what's up?
I'm pretty sure I did the same exact thing as far as font size and everything, and I saved it. Oh, sorry. I did not save index.html. That's why.
There you go.
I have a question too.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we're gonna be to edit those columns because they all have the col too, so we shouldn't do a class, like even if we wanted to edit them all the same, like we shouldn't use a class for that.
If you wanted to edit all of them, they should be a class. But
Okay.
we don't want the font size of our temperature to be 48 pixels as well. So that's why we used an ID in particular. If we did want to apply certain styling to a couple different columns, then yes, we would use a class instead of an ID.
Okay.
All right, you guys have all suffered through saving enough. I will show you one shortcut in VS Code. We are going to go up to code at the top of the screen in the very top menu bar and drop down to settings. Once we are in settings, we're going to go over a little bit to settings again and click on that. Then we are going to do a search for autosave. The first thing that will come up is this thing that says files autosave. You can go ahead and change that to on focus change. What that will do is make it so whenever you click outside of VS Code, it will automatically save your files for you. Again,
That one more time.
yep. Go up to code at the very top menu bar, not at the top of the window, but at the very top of your screen. If you're in full screen mode, you have to put your mouse up at the top of the monitor to get that toolbar to show. You're going to go down to settings and then over in that drop down and select settings. Then in search, do a search for autosave. And then the very first thing that pops up, it will say files autosave and it will be set to off. You can go ahead and change that to on focus change.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, anyone need help with their big cloud or autosave? You don't have to leave autosave on, by the way, that's totally optional.
Jaden, close the fridge. Close the fridge.
Okay. Next up, I'm going to go back to my mockup. So I'm keeping track of the progress that we're making. We are looking at our temp, and our temp here has 48 degrees and then this Fahrenheit and Celsius. Okay, well, how do we tackle that? Well, I know my number for the temperature is going to be much bigger than the text underneath it. I need to be able to independently style both of them. So I'm going to put a div inside my column, and inside that div, I'm going to put the temperature. And then I'm going to come down and do another div. And in order to get that degree Fahrenheit to show up, I'm going to use my emoji picker this time. So I'm going to hit Control Command Space again. And when I do a search for Fahrenheit, or for degree, you do a search for degree, you'll get this degree sign and the F to show up. So I'm going to do that, double click to insert it. Then I'm going to do a space. And the way that I made that vertical bar show up was another icon or symbol or key on your keyboard. That is Shift and the button under Delete. That is called a vertical bar. And we'll be using that later on for OR statements in JavaScript. So that's a vertical bar in there. And then I'm going to hit space again and hit Control Command Space, type in degree again, and that's going to bring up my Celsius. So I'm going to insert that. And when I switch back over to my browser, I've got 48, my degree Fahrenheit, my degree Celsius.
Sorry, Max, what was the command again for the icon?
Control Command Space.
Thank you.
All right. Palash, what's up?
So what's the difference here between adding a div and like two paragraphs? Like one
We
below-
could do it as two paragraphs. The only difference is paragraphs tend to have a little margin on the bottom of them. By default, you can always take that margin off in your CSS, and then that p tag would be exactly the same as adding a div. We tend to only use paragraphs when we actually have like a sentence worth of text. When it's more of a stylistic thing, we tend to use a div. But to the computer, it doesn't really matter. Like I said, the only real difference is that that p tag has some margin built into the bottom of it, so that if you're using multiple paragraphs in a row, there's some spacing between two of them.
Thank you.
But in this case, we could swap both of those out for a p tag and they would work exactly the same. Rain, what's up?
My go live button has disappeared on VS. I'm trying not to do reveal in Finder, but I'm not sure where it went.
Do you have port and a number instead? Okay, that means your server was already started up. If you click on that, it will stop the server, and then your go live button will be back. If you click on go live, it will then bring it back up.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, anyone need help before we keep going? Okay, so let's get this styled out. We've already added our div in here, so it makes it a little bit easier. I can throw an ID on this of, let's say, current temp. Then I'm going to come down to my CSS, scroll down to the very bottom, add in my £sign because it's an ID, put in my current temp, and let's try, I don't know, a font size of 36. I'm going to save that. And I'm liking that, but it's not quite standing out the way that I want it to. Maybe let's try and add a font weight of bold on that. And there we go. That's the nice pop that I'm looking for styling all of that out. Okay, I'm going to go back to my preview, my mock-up, and I've got these 3 lines of text. Now, I could do these as 3 separate P tags, but those lines of text are all together, right? I don't want them to feel like 3 separate paragraphs. I kind of want that just to be the text and then just go down onto the next line. In order to pull that off, I'm going to go to the details and I'm going to type out precipitation. And I'll do my colon and enter some number. Oh, 55%. I'm going to say humidity. And I'll enter some other number. And then I'll finally do my wind. I'm going to save that. I come over to my browser and I'm like, you boy, that does not look great. Let me just pull this out a little bit more. Okay. Now I actually have to zoom out so the spacing works. We've run into an issue here. Precipitation 55, that looks great. Humidity 40%, that looks great. But my wind is up on my humidity line. Well, why is my humidity line not up on the precipitation line? There's literally not enough room for it. That humidity line, the word humidity couldn't fit up on precipitation, which is why it went down onto the next line, but the word wind could. So in order to fix that, we use a line break. So just like our horizontal rule, our HR, we're able to use a BR, and that it's a self-closing tag, right? It's got that slash built into it. So we don't need an opening break and a closing break. All we need to do is throw our BRs in there. As soon as I save that, come back over to my Chrome, now everything is flowing correctly. Code up on the screen. And lastly, we need to finish out this location div. So I'm going to say my location, and I'm going to use that same BR that I learned from before, because this is what we're going after, right? We want the location, the time, and the current condition to show up. So I'm going to say that. I'm going to say Thursday at 6:18 p.m. In fact, I can tell you how far ahead we are in class, because last time we did this in class, it was 7:33 when I typed in that code. So we were a full hour and 15 minutes ahead of last cohort. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and type in cloudy as the conditions. I'm going to save that. I come back over and I'm like, okay, what feels off about that? I'm going to go back over to my preview. Oh, apparently I closed that by accident. And it's over on the right side of the screen. And I'm like, all right, how do I get that over there? There are 2 ways of doing this. I'm going to show you both of them. Don't follow along until I give you the all clear, and then you can decide which one you want to use. I could go in here and say, hey, this is my ID of like location. And I could come down to my location and add a text align of right, and that would get it over there and everything would be fine. However, we put our text at the end of the div, in other words, all the way on the right side of the div so frequently that Bootstrap says you don't need to create a text align right every time that you need it. Instead, what you can do is use a class called text end. So we save that, we come back over, it looks exactly the same. That is because Bootstrap is giving us this text end property already built in. Now, this is the first time that we've seen we can actually apply two classes to the same div. We can actually apply as many classes as we want, separated by a space. That's what's going to get our multiple classes applied to this div. And this is a pro tip. This is like beyond beginner stuff here. If we right click and inspect, you don't have to follow this, but just showing you how this works. In the inspect tool, we can see what that col6 is actually coming from this Bootstrap file that it provides for us. So is this text end. And we can even look under the hood. If we click on this utilities, we can see everything that the Bootstrap file provides for us to make that text end work. It's probably not the best example, but this text end is actually coming from our Bootstrap, and it's showing you that text align right that Bootstrap wrote for us in order to get that to work. Okay. I'm going to pause there. I'm going to do a quick poll just so everyone's got a chance to catch up. If you are caught up and you've got all of your code working, take a moment, take a breather, go through it. Make sure you understand every single line in here. Jen, I frequently say that we are standing on the shoulders of giants. As developers, we are always using other developers' code, dating all the way back to Linus Torvalds and the very first version of Linux, which those lines of code dating back to the 70s are powering our Mac today. So yes, we frequently use other people's code to make our code work.
Okay, Max, where the precipitation is at, mine's look like it's overlapped with like location or something.
Do you have your text end in?
Oh, okay.
I'm actually going to answer your question in 1 minute once everyone gets caught up in a different way.
Okay.
Maybe I can ask this question now, 'cause I'm trying to understand. Like, I understand the container part, but then, like when we go up and we put in like current temp and like weather icon, like, so why did we do that again?
Yeah. So we knew we wanted to change the size of our weather icon, right? We knew we wanted that to be a bigger font, but we don't want to put inline styling in our CSS, or I'm sorry, in our HTML, because intermixing the CSS right in the HTML can make our HTML much messier. So we know we can use font size, but how do we bridge the gap between this style file and our index up here? How can we tell our style file what we want to apply to what the font we want bigger is over here? So basically, we create an ID on this that our CSS can come down and reach back into the HTML and select those pieces. So the reason why this is called a selector is because we are selecting pieces of our HTML that we want to apply these styles to.
Okay, that makes total sense. And what is it called again when we did the BR?
That's just a line break. And the line break happens to be a self-closing tag because it's got the slash built into it. So we don't need an opening and a closing for it. But yeah, this is called a line break or a line break tag or element.
So is there like, say if we wanted like never mind, maybe you'll go over it next time. So I mean soon, so I won't ask.
No, go for it.
No, I was gonna say like I was thinking about the homework, but I don't want to jump.
Okay.
I'll wait.
Hopefully we'll have some time at the end of class to make sure that everyone can get a jump start on their homework, or at least ask some questions as they're getting started.
Got it. Okay. So nothing else goes down there. We're at 14. Oh, am I still off? Oh, I'm not. I'm not.
You're rubber ducking. There's nothing wrong with that. All right. Does anyone need help? It looks like most of the classes voted in here. Okay. Corwin, do you have a question? What's up?
Yeah. How did you get the Celsius on there again?
I use the emoji picker again. So if you do Control, Command, and
Oh,
Space,
right.
and then do a search,
Okay.
it's weird if you do a search for, oh, it does show up for Celsius, but it doesn't for Fahrenheit. I can't be spelling Fahrenheit that
Right.
wrong, can I? So if you do a search for degree, they both show up, and then I just use that one.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. These aren't, to be clear, these technically aren't emoji. They are Unicode characters, although all emoji are Unicode characters. But yeah, this actually isn't called the emoji picker. It's called the something. It's called like the character selector or something like that. Oh, was I really spelling it that wrong? Is it FER?
I think it's FAH.
FAH? Oh, it is FAH. Okay.
It's German.
Which is funny because the Germans were also one of the leading ones in developing the Celsius standard.
Yeah, they like to measure things. They like to know what's up with the temp.
In a system that just makes sense and it's all based off of 100? No, why would we ever use that? Tara, what's up?
I just had a question. So when we were doing our location, originally I had in there call 2 instead of 6, but I went through it and I changed it. But when I had in there the 2, it wasn't lining up. So I kept trying to figure out why it wasn't lining up. But why did we use, I guess, the number 6 instead of a different number? I think I might have missed that yesterday. Why we chose 6?
So if we go back to our preview, Bootstrap is always based off of a 12 column system. So if we don't have it add up to 12, it will either only take up part of the row or overflow the row. The available number of columns is always 12 total. So if we want this to take up half the screen, it's going to be 6. Well, that means that this is going to be the other half of the screen. That's the other 6. But there are 3 columns there. So 6 divided by 3 is 2. And so we have 2, 2, 2. 2 plus 2 is 4. 4 plus 2 is 6. 6 plus another 6 adds up to 12.
Okay, I get it now. I do remember us talking about that. I thought that it would like equally space itself out.
If you don't put any number in there, it will all equally space. So if we take these out and take a look, that's what our equal spacing would look like.
Okay.
And I'm glad you brought that up. That brings up our next issue. Everything looks great on this bigger screen size, right? But as I start pulling over here, all of a sudden my precipitation and all of that starts stacking on each other. Yet I've got all of this extra white space here that I would really like it to take up. And if I pull this all the way over to a mobile screen, that's really the only problem. And there's still white space over here. So in order to fix that, we're actually going to not listen to what's on the preview here. We're going to play around with that. And sometimes that happens during web development, right? The way that we planned it isn't necessarily the way that we want to implement it in our code. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to play around with this, because this turns out doesn't need to be a full column 6. There's too much white space there. So if we size this down to a 4, all of a sudden we've got 2 extra column spaces that we aren't using here. But if we lower this to a 4, that means we can give the details a 4 as well. Now I come back over, everything looks the same, but look at the extra space that it has. Now that actually looks a lot better when I scale it down. I don't have any of those line wrapping issues, and I can go ahead and drag it back out without any issues as well. So what I ended up doing was, instead of this being a 2 and this being a 6, I took 2 columns from this, made it a 4, and I added those 2 columns to what used to be the 2 here and made that a 4. That makes sense to everyone? Now, we will later on be learning about how we can target different column sizes based off of what we call different breakpoints or screen sizes. We'll be learning about the grid and a little bit more advanced options for the grid in, if not our next project, the project after that. But for now, this is a nice, easy solution. We had that white space to deal with, so we just moved that around, made one column a little bit bigger. All right. I think we can set ourselves out for a good goal of having this done before break. What do you guys think? All right, let's dive into it. So I'm going to go down to everything's looking pretty good in my first row. Everything's looking good with that HR. Now we need to finish our day 1 through 5, and we'll be good to go. So I'm going to come down in here, and I'm going to look at my preview, and I've got the day of the week. I've got the icon for that weather, and then I've got the temperature showing up for that. Okay. Well, because those are all on 3 separate lines, I could use a div, but it looks like there's a little bit of padding or margin underneath each one of those. So for this scenario, we are going to use 3 separate p tags, because that p tag is going to give us a little bit of space between the content in the p tag and whatever the tag is underneath it. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to take out my day 1, and I'm going to put in a p tag. And this is the forecast, right? So I'm going to say Friday, because that's tomorrow's weather. I'm going to come down here. I'm going to do another p tag, and I'm going to do my control command space, and we're going to pick snow, because when is it not snowing in Syracuse? And then we are going to come down and do one final p tag, and I guess it's got to be below freezing, right, if it's snowing. So I'll do 28 degrees, and then I'll do my control command space one final time and grab my degree icon in there. Go back over to my browser, and I'm like, got 2 issues there. One, those are all lined up. And if we're looking at the way it looks in my preview, they're nice and centered. The second issue is that my icon just isn't big enough. So I know that this icon looks like all of these other icons in here. All of those should share the same size. So instead of just throwing an ID in here, I'm going to add a class. And I'm going to call that forecast icon. We want to be specific with our class names, because we shouldn't just call that icon. Why should we not call that icon? Well, it turns out this icon is bigger than this icon. So we want to be specific in the naming so that we know, hey, what are these styles applying to? These are only applying to the forecast icons. So I'm going to go back over to my CSS. and I'm going to grab my forecast icon, but instead of using the pound sign, we're using a class. Because we're using a class, we have to say period forecast icon, and we are going to make them a font size of 36 px. I save that. I come back over to my browser. Okay, I've got a nice big snowflake now. The only other thing that I want to clean up is all of this is left aligned, and I don't want it to be left aligned. Well, just like our text end property, there is another property we can use called text center. So I go ahead and I use my text center, and now that pushed everything over the way I want.
Super quick question.
Yeah.
When you're making your P classes, how are you jumping down? What button are you pushing to jump down, not into the next div line, but to make like another line? Like instead of taking the mouse and hitting over at the end of the P and then pushing enter?
You can use command and the right arrow key. That will jump you to the end of the line, and then you can hit enter.
Okay.
Although, and I'm somewhat ashamed to admit this, I do put my cursor at the end and then I hit enter.
Oh, you were going so fast, I thought that maybe you had like a trick or something for it.
I wish I did, but the command arrow to get out of the P tag and then the enter will get you down to the next line. That's the quickest way I know how to do it. There may be another shortcut.
I think only the command arrow is the shortcut to that.
Okay. We are going to learn a little bit of Emmet next week, which will open up a whole new world of shortcuts for you guys. But for right now, command arrow is the quickest way that we know of so far.
Is it cheating if I'm already using it? Because I already did it before.
No, it is not cheating. Everyone has a different toolbox. We'll load them up slowly but surely.
That will be a lifesaver for a lot of things.
Max.
Yep.
So I noticed at the bottom of your screen, you have Prettier. We've been kind of speaking on Prettier. What exactly is it doing to your webpage right now in VS Code?
Absolutely nothing, because I have Prettier turned off. I thought it was unfair for me to be using a tool and not teach you guys how to use that tool as well. So I turned Prettier off earlier this week. What Prettier would be doing for me is if my indentation were not correct, which you will notice all of my code so far, the indentation is correct. But let's say we were going along and we were like, all right, everything looks the way we want it to, everything's fine. Oh, I just wish the computer would be smart enough to go through and indent it correctly. That's what Prettier does, is it goes through and it takes your code and makes it prettier by fixing all of the indentation. So we'll be learning about Prettier towards the end of next week. I'm going to show you a shortcut at the beginning of next week for Emmet, which is going to help us generate out the beginning HTML files. And then towards the end of the week, I will introduce you guys to Prettier and how we use it not only to clean up our code, but then also how we can use it to know when our code is wrong and how we need to go in and manually fix something. So that will be coming towards the end of next week.
I have a question about the selector in the CSS for the forecast icon. Why did you say we used a period again instead of the hashtag?
Yes, we use hashtag whenever it's an ID. So you can see weather icon is a hashtag because it's an ID in our HTML. But for our forecast icon, we made that a class. The reason we
Okay.
made it a class was because you're not supposed to repeat IDs. Your code will not burst into flames if you do use an ID twice. However, that's considered invalid HTML. If it's something that we're reusing, it should be a class. And because it's a class in the HTML, we use a period in our CSS to line up the class.
So that's like what we did for container.
Yes, yes. Because
Okay.
container, you'll notice in our HTML was a class.
Okay.
That might be a really good question, and I don't know, hypothetically, could be on your quiz this week. All right, we good to go? Anyone have any questions? All right, now we get into the fun part. I'm going to take this whole div and copy it. And now for the painful part, I'm going to go down to all of my other columns and delete them. Because I want to paste my nicely formatted divs with all of my content in them 5 times, so it looks like this. I am then going to go through and update these for the different days of the week and change my weather, because we're going to get a rainbow on Saturday, and on Sunday, I'm forecasting a unicorn is going to show up. And it's going to be 72 because that's the perfect temperature for unicorns. And on Monday, it's going to rain because why not? And it's going to be the worst temperature to rain, which is 34 degrees. And then on Tuesday, it's going to, I don't know, thunderstorm because yay, spring. And it will be, I don't know, 98. 34 to 98 seems like a totally valid temperature swing. So I come back over, I save, and I should have my forecast all taken care of. Classes for multiple, ID is for single, correct, Jen? Now, the police are not going to knock down your door if you make it a class and only use it once, or if you have an ID and you reuse it. But in general, we like to clean that up a little bit and use classes for repeats. Give everyone a minute just to get that updated. And then we get into the fun part.
Wait, so it's 98 degrees on Tuesday, but it's also thunderstorm at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Perfect weather.
That's not really like strange for Syracuse.
Unfortunately not. All right. We're in the home stretch. I'm feeling pretty good about this. And I'm like, yeah, I just made my first website. This is great. And so I ship this off to my client and I say, here's my site. And they look at it and they go, well, it's 90% there, but I asked you to build this. And this aren't exactly the same. Okay, so we look at that and we go, all right, this icon is off, right? Start at the top left, work our way over. What's a little off about this? Well, it's nicely spaced here, but over here, it's kind of all the way to the left. Well, we learned that we can use text center in our forecast What happens if we go up to our cloud icon and add a text center to that? All right. That helped. That brought it over. That's feeling more kind of in line with what I'm looking for. Then we are looking at all of this and I'm like, precipitation, that text right up against the edge. I don't really love that. And I don't love that manliest is up at the top here, and it doesn't feel like there's enough space there. What if we go to our container, because our container is holding everything, scroll up. Oh, we already have a container in our CSS. What happens if we add some padding of 15 px? Ooh. Notice that little difference? All we needed was a little bit of white space in that box, and now all of a sudden, that breathing room is feeling really, really nice, right? So we're feeling a lot better about that. And now I'm looking at this and I'm like, all right, my preview here looks nice and weighted. What do I mean by weighted or symmetrical? Well, this size is just about the same size as the lower half. So this top row is the same height as this bottom row. Now, as a beginner HTML developer, you may say, oh, let's just use that height property and shrink that row up. Bad, bad, bad idea. 99% of the time, unless it's an image, you don't want to use the height property, because what you're doing is you're constraining all of that content. Instead of changing the size of the content to fit to what you want, you're telling the browser, I don't care how big the content gets, it has to be in this height. So instead, it's usually a much better idea to make the content be smaller or not have the same amount of height than it is to tell the browser, hey, go take wherever that content is and shrink it in. But I'm looking at this and I'm like, I don't really know where that height is coming from, because all we did was put in a couple p tags. So I'm going to come back over to my browser and I'm going to right click on Friday and hit inspect. And now we can see, hey, when I hover over that, I've got orange showing up. What is that orange? If you can't remember, you scroll down to the very bottom and we see our box model. We've got 16 pixels showing up. And if I do my p tag here, now I can see another 16 on that p tag. And on this p tag, I've got another 16. There's where all of my extra space is coming from. I don't want all of that extra space. But I'm also in a predicament because I don't want to add a class to each one of these p tags to say, don't be so tall. Well, now we can actually get a little fancy. We can come up to this class row and add an ID here that says forecast row. Then in our CSS, we can go find the forecast row and find any p tags inside that forecast row and make the margin bottom on them 0. I save, I come back over. Now look, that margin disappeared. We did something fancy there. We know about IDs. We've added IDs before. That's no big deal. We've done this # here before. That's no big deal. But now we're using a more advanced selector. We are saying, go find all the p tags, but only p tags that are inside this forecast row. Why do we even need that forecast row? Well, if we use a p tag anywhere else on our site, now the margin's gone on that. And we're like, well, we don't really want to get rid of the margin on all of our p tags, only the p tags inside forecast row. So this selector narrows in and says, go find the forecast row then go find any P tags that also have an ID of forecast row, either in them or in their parent. And now we've got a nice spacing going on there. Last thing we'll practice, I'm looking at my preview and I'm noticing this text is just a tiny smidge smaller than the text that we've got going on in here. Now, you may not notice that difference, but when we're looking at the design, there is something to be said about, hey, this information is a little bit more important than this information over here. So by just bumping down that text size a little bit, our eye is more drawn to the more important information here than it is to the smaller information over here. So to fix that, just like we fixed everything else, I'm going to go up and I'm going to find where that is. I'm going to add an ID onto this called, let's say, details. I'm going to go to my CSS. I'm going to go find my details. And I'm going to say, maybe that's got a font size of, let's try 12px. I save. That shrinks down a little bit. And I am good to go. Couple little things we haven't touched on. We didn't make the Fahrenheit bold. We didn't make manliest bold or the location bold, but I'm going to let that slide. Believe it or not, we just made our first web page. And this web page, I don't know, to me, looks good enough that I'd put that out and stick it on my fridge. That's a pretty good looking web page. So spend the next 4 minutes going through every single line of code here. Make sure you understand it. Ask your questions if they come up, and then we'll go on break. Don't go on break yet. Go through this code. Make sure you're understanding it. Think through the process, the order that we did it, and let me know if you have any questions.
So I just want clarification on something. So when we do a class, when we do an ID, it's because we want to make changes in sizing or whatever to whatever the class is, right? So
We do that for a class or an ID. Both the point of the class and the ID is to make it so that we can select that particular thing in our CSS or multiple of that particular thing, right? We use a class whenever we want to use that selector multiple times. So down in the case of our forecast icon, because we had multiple forecast icons across many different divs, we used a class for that. And then we use that in our CSS here. We use the period because it was a class. We wrote that CSS once and it applied to all 5 places that we use that class. But sometimes we say, hey, we're styling just one particular thing here, right? There's only going to be one forecast row. There aren't multiple forecast rows, but we want to be able to style just that particular one. And because of that, we use an ID instead.
Okay. And the same thing for the reason why we did, like for the forecast row, we put the P for the paragraph. So we are only saying that we want the margin bottom to be 0 for just those, right?
for just the P tags inside the forecast row. Yes.
Thank you.
Is it Janaya? Janaya, what's up?
Okay, so I believe I have everything correct. It's just my day one, in which I am looking at that, which will be Friday. That one is like not where the rest of the days are. And I didn't quite see what I did incorrect to make it a little bit bigger than the other wordings.
Yeah, share your screen. Let's take a look.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay, so you have your you've got your call and you've got your text center, and then you've got the word icon attached to your text center. I think if you just take out that word icon, it will fix your issue.
Okay, let's. No.
Oh, well, it kind of did.
Yeah, I just need it to center correctly, I guess.
So scroll it down a little bit so we can compare it. You've got that problem on all of them. So we don't want the word icon in there. So if you take that out, I think it will center all of them. I don't think that will fix your sizing issue. While you're doing that, you've got that should be text. You've got forecast icon spelled right here, but you're missing the quotes. And then you've got forecast icon spelled wrong here. So here, let me request Ramon and I can help you with that. So whenever we have a class, we always, whatever the value is for it, we put in quotes, and then forecast, we want to spell consistently across all of these.
Okay. Okay, so maybe that was messing me up.
I think that's going to do it. And then this one needs the text center and the forecast icon. There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Kind of weird, right, to write code and have it do such a visual thing in the browser. But when we kind of break it apart and go, oh, the text center is what's pushing it over, or the forecast icons, what's sizing it properly, it makes it a little bit easier to connect the two together.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's go on break. We'll be back at 7:25. When we come back, we're going to just get set up for next week. We're going to plan out the new site that we're working on. And then we will dive into the homework and give you guys an option to get out of here early if you would like. Jen, in order to screenshot just one tab, you can hit Command, Shift, and 4. And then draw a box around what you want to screenshot, and that screenshot will show up in your desktop. The other way you can do it is if you hit Command, Shift, 4, and the space bar, then you can click on any window and it will screenshot whatever window you clicked on. Command, Shift, 4, let go of everything, then hit the space bar once, then click on the window. See you guys 7:25 after break.
Max, can I ask you a quick question? When we were doing when we were reviewing or, looking over what we had done. So I know that we didn't make the Fahrenheit bold, but I wanted to see if I could like use what we were learning and do it myself.
Yeah.
So I did it and I got the Fahrenheit bold, but then my Celsius dropped down below it. And
Try using a span instead of a div.
oh, okay. All right.
So
That's
divs
fair.
are always, and that's a really good point. Divs are always what we call a block element. They're always going to take up the full width. But instead, we want to just say, well, we want to style a piece of the text in there. And that's what a span element is better for, because that's an inline element.
Okay. All right. So I'll play around with that then. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, we are going to keep on going. Any questions that popped up over the break over everything we've accomplished so far in the weather app? I did look into the PEX website. The access code is supposed to be emailed to you. So if you did not get that email and checked in your spam, just shoot me a message in Slack and I'll confirm that your email address is correct. It's the email address that was on your original application is the email address that we used. So just shoot me a Slack message if you're still having problems in PEX. They do say that access code goes to spam frequently, so check your junk or your spam folder. And if you still don't have it, shoot me another message. I'll confirm your email address. And if you still can't find it, we will reach out to PEX support and go from there. Can anyone else hear me? Okay, Jen, it's you. Okay, so we are going to just get set up for our next project. We're going to go through that step of kind of boxing everything out. And then we're going to get our files all set up for week 3, day 1. And then we'll use the rest of class time as kind of open office hours for working on your homework. With all of that said, I just launched an office hours poll. We've done office hours in the past. We've also had office hours where anyone who shows up are also the people who are scheduling the one-on-ones. So I made it a multiple choice. Pick all of the times that work for you, or you can just pick one of the first 2 questions or options there. So give everyone an opportunity to go ahead and vote in that. If anyone has questions, let me know. The Friday option, I realized I forgot to put yes, Friday at 6 p.m. I love you guys, but I'm not getting up at 6 a.m. for you. That should say 6 p.m. Office hours we do usually for about an hour. They're totally optional to attend, and it's just a chance for you guys to ask questions or hear what other people are asking. Want to give everyone an opportunity to vote in that. It's like almost everyone is in, so thank you for selecting those times. Right, go ahead and end that poll and make sure that I download those results. Okay, we're going to keep on going. I'm going to head over to the daily outline for today. I will also drop a link to this in the chat if you want to follow along. Oh, the wrong one. If you want to follow along and do this in preview, you can. If you just want to use the version that I'm going to mock up, I will also put a link to this in week 3, day 1's outline, so you don't need to follow along if you don't want to. But we're going to go through that planning process again of kind of figuring out where our columns are going to be. So pop open that link if you want to follow along in the chat. Remember to hit the download button in the top right. That will download the file for us, and then resist the urge to click on it in the downloads bar. Instead, you're going to want to go down to your dock and open up that download here.
Oh, you're not sharing screen yet.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for the reminder. I opened the link. I hit the little download button in the top right down to your dock, and then pop that open, and it should open it up in preview. Okay, once we make it in there, anyone have issues getting that open in preview who wants to follow along?
I still can't access my canvas.
Okay, you can use the link that I posted in the chat to get this file downloaded.
Okay.
Okay, from here, I'm going to get into the markup tools. That is the little pen. If you do not have a pen icon in your toolbar, you probably opened it in your browser instead of opening it in preview. So you want to make sure that you go down to your dock and use the downloads to open it, or you can go into Finder and go to your downloads and open it from there. Either one is totally fine, but you want to make sure that you've got this opened up in preview. This is the next website that we are going to be building. So I'm going to start going through by identifying not only where all of my rows are, but we're actually going to get to a place where we've got rows and columns, and in those columns, we're going to have their own rows and columns. So this is the next project we're going to be building. It may be similar to a particular news site, maybe say Syracuse.com, but for copyright reasons, we're building this all from scratch, right? All right, so we're going to dive in. I'm going to say, hey, my whole site is going to go into its own container. So we're not going to worry too much about the containers out of the gate. We're only going to focus on the rows and the columns for this markup. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to pick my shape, I'm going to get my rectangle, and I'm going to say, hey, it looks like there are 3 distinct sections in that top kind of nav bar area. So I'm going to highlight this all the way over and say, this is my first row. Now, inside that row, I've got 1, 2, 3 different columns, and they're kind of interestingly evenly spaced out. So I'm going to try and represent that. I'm going to go grab another rectangle. I'm going to change it to, let's say, pink for my columns. And because we know about left aligned text, centered text, and text end or right aligned text, we can replicate that in our columns. We can kind of see how this will lay out into roughly 3 columns like that. We can then come down here and say, hey, this row looks like it's all the same. Now you might be tempted there to use columns for each of these individual words. The problem is all of those words are so close together, and we've got a ton of space on the right side and the left side. So we're going to end up making this its own div so that we can move down the site. However, we aren't actually going to use columns for this, which is why we won't have anything pink. We'll learn how to use spans on those and use our padding on either side to achieve this design, this effect. Okay, now it gets a little interesting. Where would we put our next row?
The whole bottom portion?
The
Yeah.
whole bottom portion. Well, if we do that, what are our columns?
The first, second, third.
All right, if we do that, that almost looks like it is a 3, a 6, and another 3. So that's cool. None of that causes issues. Now we get in here and we go, all right, what's going on over here? Latest is pretty easy, right? That's going to be its own little div. So that won't cause any issues. But we come down in here and we're like, well, how are we going to pull off the 6 minutes and the headline 1? Because you notice all of these line up here. What
Can
we
do columns
do,
instead of rows?
we actually use this as its own row. So I'm going to change the color here back to orange because those are going to be their own rows. And then inside this row, we're actually going to put 2 columns. One for our 6 minutes, which I'll put back to pink, and another one for our headline. Okay, visually looking at that, that kind of makes sense. But we just did something that we've never done before. When we're looking at our big orange box here, this is one ginormous row. Nothing wrong with that. This is 3 ginormous columns. Nothing wrong with that. However, we use a column for the first time inside this big column. That is okay, but there is one very important rule. You cannot use a column within another column unless there is a row between them. So we can't just start using these pink columns because then it's going to be really confused. It's going to think these columns are supposed to be in the same row as these giant columns going on here. That's not the case. So the way we get the computer to understand that it's a whole new set is we make this its own row. Now that it's its own row, we can actually use a col 2 and a col 10 or whatever they end up being inside this big column without confusing it, because this orange row acts as a little reset. And we can see with these headlines, rows don't actually all need to be the same height. This row is going to be a little bit longer, but it's still going to have the same column layout. Then we would do the same for headline 3. We can keep on going here, except the rest of this design, not particularly column heavy, right? So it's pretty easy to see, hey, we're going to need a div for our image. And we're going to learn about how we can size this image and center the image and not run into any issues. Believe it or not, all of this can be one big div. We may use some p tags in there. We're using our UL for the first time in a real website, right? We're learning about those bullet points. And the same goes for this big story down here. All of that can kind of live together as one div. Yeah, we may use p tags in there. We may use some H1s or add in some styling, but that's it. And the same goes over here. We've got our advertisement and we've got our images, but really these are all going to be all their own little elements. They're not necessarily going to be their own rows. Question. Go for it.
So, where do we get the images from?
We're
These?
going to use Unsplash, which is the royalty-free website that I showed you guys. When we're building this, you can use whatever images you want. You don't have to necessarily use the images that I selected.
Oh, I thought that was what is it? Unsplash?
Yep. Unsplash is that site where we can go, oh, wrong monitor. We can get royalty-free images. So if you do a search for, I used puppies before, so I guess we'll get kittens this time. All of these are royalty-free images. So if you hit the little download icon on them, it will download into your downloads, and then you can use those directly.
So, and one more question. Is this homework or what is it?
We're building this in class
right now?
on Monday.
Oh, okay, on Monday.
We're going to get the files set up for this, just so that we're all ready to go week 3, day 1. We can pop it open, and then we'll be diving in to building this layout on Monday and Tuesday.
Okay. Listen. Oh, sorry.
Rain, did you have a question?
So no matter the height of those rows,
yep,
each row will equal exactly 12 of those columns. Am I saying that right? So
yes, row height is always dynamically calculated based off of whatever the content is inside of it. So because this headline is longer, the row will automatically grow in height. However, whenever we use a new row, it will always have 12 spacing, even though this row happens, those 12 spaces happen to be across the entire monitor. This row still is broken down into 12, but it's going to be 12 teeny tiny little breakdowns.
Thank you.
The way you said it was probably better than the way I explained it, but yes, you are right. Whenever we use a row, it always resets the width of the row to however much space it can fill.
Okay, thank you.
Now, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but I'm just gonna ask because I'm curious.
Yeah.
So instead of doing like rows within the rows, would we be able to do something like a div class and then style it with like certain like CSS instead of doing?
You can. So the reason we teach Bootstrap grid is because I find it's the easiest way to build a complex layout. With that said, that is not the only way to lay out a site using CSS. So if we wanted to, we could use something called CSS grid. CSS grid is the browser native version of building a grid without having to use Bootstrap. It actually came out long after Bootstrap came out. And under the hood, that's what Bootstrap now uses. The other ways you could lay out a site, there are different positioning elements that you can use, like fixed and sticky and static. And you can actually use a pixel layout and say, hey, this second column should be starting at 50 pixels down the page and 100 pixels from the left side of the page.
Okay.
However, the reason why we don't use that method is because it's not responsive. What happens when your monitor shrinks in, right? Well, we still want the headlines to show up and we still want the advertisements to show up. But if you statically positioned everything, if you gave it a pixel dimension for everything, what happens on your phone screen? You'd have to be scrolling all the way over. We may not want that to be the case. So there are different methods. And then the final important one that we'll touch on just a little bit is something called Flexbox, which is basically saying, how can we flex these items around in order for them to lay out properly? And there's a tool called Flexbox Froggy that I'll show you guys, as I think it's listed as an optional assignment, where you can play around with how can we do a layout without the grid. So there are certainly ways to do this without the Bootstrap grid, but I find it's the easiest one to understand and build a website that is production scale. And when we say production scale, we just mean one that, you know, you can actually see value in, one that you would actually show to a client and say, well, I can build something like this for you. So not the only way of doing it, but I think the most powerful or the easiest way. Allie, what's up?
Oh, so my question was just about the wireframe, I guess, or mock-up that we're wireframing. So that left part, is the headline one in its own orange box?
Yes. So there is a row around both the time and the headline. And then inside that row, there are 2 columns.
Okay.
So this will actually be a div class row, this outer orange box, that will have a div class col3 for this entire latest section, that will have a div class row, that orange box inside this col3, and inside this row, there will be another col and a col here for the headline.
Okay.
So you've got a row, a col, another row, and then 2 cols. I should make like a "you are here" graphic and try and line it up with our code. So as we're working our way into the wireframe, we can also see where we're at in our code.
Oh, sorry, I should have unmuted, but I did make a color key so that I could just have it as a reminder.
Cool. And if it makes sense to make these rows a different color, like that's totally fine. This isn't like an industry standard where, like, I wish I was taught the grid system this way. And I actually had a student from cohort 2 come back and be like, I did not understand it until I went through this exercise, and now I understand like what the point of the row is or where the columns are showing up. So I wish this was something that was industry standard. This is really whatever it takes to make it make sense to you in planning, so that when you get to the code step, it's easier to build out all of those nested divs. That's totally fine. And we'll take a slightly different approach for this this new site. The new site, we're actually, instead of getting all of the layout done and then doing all of the styling, we're actually going to go component by component, and we're going to style everything as we build it. So we'll still do layout first, but we're only going to do the layout for that top nav bar, and then we'll go style it. And then we'll move down into this second area, and then we'll style that out. And then we'll go into the latest section and build the entire latest thing and style it. And then we'll move on to the next section from there. So slightly different approach, but you may find that that makes more sense to you. All right. We ready to set up our files before we switch over to homework mode? Goggin, what's up? You're muted.
No, I was gonna just say that I think this is a much easier way to learn CSS than just going for like a straight CSS and then learning a framework for CSS, and it's like a mess.
Everything is very project oriented in our curriculum. And I have trouble articulating how project based it is. This is, you guys are going to get to the end of this and be like, all right, I went through all of free code camp. I had no idea what CSS was because I was learning it in a little bubble. And now I can see, oh, I can actually make a real site with CSS, right? That is my teaching style. That is how I wish I learned it. And that is how I finally got confident enough to say I can do this on the job, because I could build something with it. So this project-based learning style goes all the way through to week 24. We are going to be building project after project after project, and things like the weather app, and we're going to get into a chat app. You're going to be so sick of it because we're going to keep on coming back to it and applying more of those concepts that we're learning to those things that we've already built. So we are going to come back to the weather app, and we're going to learn how to make that interactive. We're going to learn how to get actual real live weather data to show up in there. Then we're going to make it even more interactive and be able to change the weather location and have it pull in that data instead. That's going to require JavaScript. That's going to require APIs. Not all of the projects, but there are a select few that keep on popping up that we take these concepts and learn them hands-on. Jen, what's up?
Is it okay if I am either printing these out or drawing this out and doing it with a pen and paper instead of this whole?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would encourage you to do that. And if you got a projector and want to do it on a whiteboard, that's a great option. If you want to print out a copy of it and attack it with a highlighter, that's totally fine. If you are like, I hate visuals, the way this is going to make the most sense to me is if I go into Google Docs or Word or Pages and do an outline. That's another great way of doing it. And sometimes that outlining step is a really good middle ground between your code and this step, right? So it may be helpful. I'm going to go to a new Google Doc, maybe. Why are you? Come on, get out there. And I'm going to open a new one. And it may be helpful to think about this as, hey, my whole site is going to be, let's tackle this first row is going to be that blue bar. And in that blue bar, I'm going to have a col 4, a col 4, and a col 4. And the first one is going to be menu. And the next one is going to be the company name. And the last one is going to be sign in. Okay, now where's the next one that we're going to? Well, that's a whole new row, and that's going to be my nav bar or my links bar, let's call it. So row, links bar. And then I'm going to use a bunch of spans in there to make that work. Okay, now what's next? I come down, I've got another row, and this is the main page content. Okay, now what's inside of that? I've got a col 3, a col 6, and a col 3. So I go col 3, and that's going to be my headlines. I got my col 6, and that's going to be my articles. And I get my col 3, and that's going to be my ads. Now, if you're someone who's like, I have no idea what he's doing over here, but this makes total sense to me, that's fine. This may be a helpful step because now you can come in here and go, okay, under those headlines, what do I have? I've got a row for the H1 text. That's this one up here. Now I've got another row for the headline 1. What does headline 1 have in it? It has a col, let's say 3 for the time, and it's got a col 9 for the headline title. Okay, now I've got 3 of those headlines. I'm going to come in here, copy this whole thing. Ooh. And paste it because I've got headline 2 and headline 3. Now that I'm looking at that, did anyone just have a light bulb moment of, wait a second, indentation matters. Indentation matters not only on my outline, but the level of indentation that I have here. I'm in a row that's in a col, that's in a row that's in a col. I'm 1, 2, 3, 4 levels deep of my indentation. When we get into our code tomorrow, or I'm sorry, on Monday, you're going to see once we get this col 3 done, what else is going to be 4 levels of code indented, also that div. So if this is something, I will have this up and I will have this up as well. And so once we finish our code, we can kind of go back into our planning process and say, was this helpful, right? And if you're looking at this and you're like, nope, let me at the code, I can figure out it from here, that's totally fine. If you're looking at this mock-up and you're like, I'm confused the heck out of this, but once we get into the code, I can just rip through it, that's totally fine. Or if you're someone where this outline step is going to help you as a stepping stone to make sure that you're staying on track, maybe it's too hard when you've got the visual done to go back and forth between the code and the visual. And so sometimes it's helpful. Now you can just put this down. You can say, I don't need this anymore. When I'm building my code, when I'm doing my layout, I'm going to reference this outline instead of referencing the mockup. That may be a useful tool for you as well. Everyone builds sites a little differently, and that's totally fine. These are tools in your toolbox. They aren't necessarily required steps that you have to learn. I will link to this at the end of class, so you guys have it in the daily outline as well. All right, let's set up some files, and then you guys can choose to either get out of here early or get started on your homework. I will stick around for a bit to make sure there are no questions, but I'm going to get our files started for next week. So I'm going to close out of my VS Code entirely. I'm going to go down to Finder. I am going to go to my desktop on the wrong monitor. Desktop, my code. I'm going to right click and create my week 3. And inside my week 3, I am going to create my day 1. Once I have my day 1 created, I'm going to grab this folder and drag it down to my dock and pop that open in VS Code. If that's too fancy for you, it's fine. You can go old school, file new window, file open folder, pop open that day 1. That's totally fine. Inside my day 1, oh, come on, rectangle. There we go. Inside my day 1, we need to create 2 files. The easy one is my style.css, because I'm not putting anything in it, right? We're just getting it created. We are also going to create our index.html. And are you ready for another shortcut? Inside our index.html, we are going to type a single exclamation point and hit enter. Well, pow, a lot of code in there. It's okay. We're going to save that code for Monday. We'll go through line by line and make sure we understand it. But before we panic and we're like, whoa, what the heck is all of that? We still have our HTML tag. We still have our head tag. We still have our body tag. We've seen this title tag before. So really, all that's new is a couple of these meta things, which we'll cover on Monday. This doc type HTML and this weird lang en thing. We will cover all of those on Monday, but I just want to show you the shortcut one more time. As long as we have our file properly called index.html, we can type a single exclamation point, that's our shift 1, and hit the enter button, and it will generate the structure of our HTML document for us. Now, we're not completely done. We want to get our CSS linked, and then we will actually call it a night. So underneath my title tag, I know I'm going to need Bootstrap. How do I know I need Bootstrap? Well, we just went over a bunch of rows and columns and containers and all of that stuff. None of that magic works unless we have Bootstrap. So you guys are going to get sick of this step. We got to go to getbootstrap.com. We need to go to our docs. We need to scroll down to number 2. We need to find this link tag, highlight it all the way over, copy it, come back to our code, paste it. Again, that is getbootstrap.com. We're going to click on docs or click on read the docs. Either one is fine. We're going to scroll down to the number 2 area. And you may notice, hey, number 1, that looks awfully familiar to what VS Code just generated for us. It's almost like the stars are aligning as to what we're covering in Monday's class. Okay, scroll down to number 2. We need this link tag. Go ahead, highlight that all the way over, copy it. Head back over to our code. At the very end of our head, before the closing link, we're going to put in our bootstrap line. And we need one other line in there before we forget it. We're going to put our link tag in. The href is going to go to style.css. The rel is a style sheet. Close out that link tag, and we are all set up for Monday's class. Anyone? Yeah, Goggin.
Are we gonna eventually get the npm package for Bootstrap or no? Or just
We won't use the npm package for Bootstrap, but we will certainly be using npm with React.
Okay.
And with Node and Express as well. So we will certainly be covering npm, just not directly related to Bootstrap.
Got it.
Jen, what's up?
Can we pin the Bootstrap code to our clipboard?
I don't think that's a feature on the Mac. Unless I'm missing something, I don't know how to do that. If you know how to do that, then by all means, go for it.
I'm gonna try.
What was that?
How do you, can you pin the Bootstrap code to your clipboard?
Max, how often does that link change on the docs?
Oh, good point. That link changes pretty frequently because the Bootstrap updates it every couple months and the version number changes. And when the version number changes, so does this long integrity thing, which is a security check to make sure that when you load in the file, it's loading in like the proper Bootstrap official version of it. With that said, you could be using Bootstrap version 5 for the next 4 or 5 years and not run into any issues with it being like an older version. So if you want to keep using that one, that's totally fine. The other thing that I'll say is while we create, I believe the unit is a metric shitload of projects throughout the entire course. You won't be creating this many projects from scratch in your professional career. So while this will feel very repetitive at the beginning of every project, it's much rarer to be creating this many projects from scratch once you get out into the workforce.
You guys can pin your browser page to so you don't lose that or you don't have to search that every time.
You can, yeah, you can just click on the star if you're using Chrome and add it to a folder, or you can right click on the tab and hit pin, and that will save it as a pinned thing over here. Anyone need help with file setup? Keep in mind that the name of this file is not #style.css, and it's just style.css. This icon automatically gets generated by VS Code because we use that CSS file extension. So make sure your file name does not have a # at the beginning of it, other than just this icon. Shania, what's up?
All right, so I'm gonna learn it. I always get lost when we go into the C5 my code on the desktop and then making the file.
Okay. So we're in C5, we go to desktop, we open up my code, and then
Okay.
I right click and create new folder for W3.
So we go into the my code, right?
Correct.
And then for that, we create duplicate.
No. We're not duplicating anything. We only duplicate when we're bringing over yesterday's code into today's code.
Okay,
So we're going to make a whole new folder for week 3 because we're starting this project from scratch.
okay,
And then same goes for day 1, which should be inside of week 3. We're again creating that new one, a new folder from scratch. Once we get day 1 created, we're going to open this in VS Code and create the index.html and style.css, but over in VS Code, not in Finder.
okay. All right, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions?
We're good to go.
You are good to go. I'm going to stick around in case anyone has questions with their homework, has no idea where to get started, got started on it, or has questions about it, has something about all this week that's been confusing them. I will stick around for at least the next couple minutes. But if you are all set on your homework, feel free to get out of here. Have an awesome weekend, and I will see you guys Monday, 5:30 on Zoom. Flash, what's up?
So I just finished that that logo menu, the W2RP assignment, and looks like I like really went a little too much out with the code. Should I share my screen?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Going overboard is rarely a problem on the assignments.
So this is the final output, which kind of like pretty much looks like this, but
Beautiful.
But it's like I added like too many classes separately for gray boxes, red boxes, and these ones on the end, the red boxes, I had to like add border top, right, and bottom, so it doesn't like have a border on the left end for the leftmost box and right end for the rightmost box.
That's totally fine.
Okay.
I like seeing the ambition. I'm trying to think.
Sorry.
I'm trying to think. There's a way that you don't need to do that. Gray box, red box. Trying to remember what the trick is for it though.
Like adding a P element for 1, 2, and 3, so it has like a little padding of itself.
You could do that. I feel like I did something hacky where I can't remember what I did to get around what you did, but this solution is totally fine. But for everyone else watching, you don't need to go that in depth, right? So if there's like one little thing that isn't lining up, or you're like, oh, the red box goes all the way to the end. Oh, padding. You can do padding on the gray box, which would fix your issues and not have to target the separate borders on either side.
I see. So like padding left 0 and padding right 0 for this particular box?
Or for that particular gray box, or you put the padding in there and make the padding line up with however much the spacing is between the other columns.
Okay.
That's sorry, my brain was like, there's a way to do it. But for everyone else, if you are going through that mock-up and you're like, all right, this looks close, but the red boxes are right up against the line instead of having a little gray space between them, that's totally fine. Don't go overboard on like what we call a pixel perfect mock-up. But if you want to take on the challenge, I love seeing creative solutions to getting it to work. So this would be totally fine and acceptable for me.
Perfect. Thank
and
you.
get full credit. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just have a question. Can I show my code in like
Yeah.
All right.
That's the whole point of the rest of the class, is just going through and making sure everyone feels like they've got a good action plan.
Okay, I'm not really sure how to do this yet. I didn't do this before. Okay, hold on, more. Oh, share screen, duh. Okay, sorry.
You're fine.
And then, yep, okay, so I'm gonna share this one. Sorry, some of my stuff is out of view.
Okay.
So, let me just move this over really quick. Okay, this is not what I wanted to share. So what I'm gonna do is just open the other one. And then this was my original one.
Okay.
So this is what it looks like.
Yep. This would get full credit too.
Okay, but I did have a question. I'm like, what? I feel like I might have put too many. So I was kind of like on the track that Palash is on, I think. And I was okay, so here's the code. Like, you see how I have all like the ID main column, ID side column, and then over here I was okay. So I guess my question was with the CSS of it. So like, am I doing the classes right in the IDs right, or is there a different way that I can do it that's more productive?
Yeah, great question. So things like I'm gonna request remote control. Things that where the CSS, we're gonna learn this concept called dry, which stands for don't repeat yourself, DRY. And one of which is like you've got your text align right here, and we've got two things that are both using the text align right. So for that, it would be better to make a class something like text-right. Still use this text align right in the class, but then in our ID menu column, we don't need this ID because we can just use our text-right. And then so we can take this line out entirely. And then same goes for the aside. Oh, yes, code, don't. Okay. Then same goes for the aside column. Now we don't need an entirely separate ID on that. We can reuse our text right here. And we don't need this aside column. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sorry, I had muted myself. So like I was trying to move it back, but you were using sorry. So I didn't know that you could like reverse it like that. So okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
So that's one. And then the other is I try to almost never use height directly. Instead, it's better to apply like margin and padding to get it to that size. But you would still need an ID on it. So like your row 2, this you would say instead of a height of 200 px, maybe instead you grab the main column, which I think we deleted, which is fine. But maybe I take this out and say, hey, my main column needs to have padding on the bottom of it of 175 pixels. And if we take a look at what that looks like, I think this is the right one.
Yeah.
That achieves the same thing without setting a static height. The reason why we don't want to use a static height is if we put in like 10 paragraphs of text here, the height wouldn't grow any bigger to contain that text. So the text would literally like flow right on top of the sponsors and the ads and all of that stuff. So instead, it's a better approach to like put padding on the bottom of this than it is to set the height and make it not be able to grow at all.
That was on row 2. We did that?
Yes.
Okay.
So now row 2 doesn't have an ID, so we don't even need this.
Hey, yes. Okay.
So
all
that
right.
helps starting to clean it up a little bit.
All right, sorry. And then so the pattern is what, that gray area? Is that what got?
Yep. If we change this to 75, you see it shrinks way up.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. So I guess I think I was confusing that with like the
Oh,
border.
you wouldn't have lost points for using height. Like height's a totally fine thing. And for this assignment, because there isn't really any content going inside of it, height would have been totally fine to use. But that is a very common thing that I see kind of bite people in the ass, is that when they use height, everything looks fine at the beginning. And then they get either into responsive design or start loading in their content. And then height ends up causing them headaches down the road.
Okay, so I mean, I guess I could change this. Let me do like 20.
But like I said, like now careful, you did padding, not padding bottom. So that
Sorry.
applied it everywhere.
That makes sense. Nice debugging.
There you go.
Yes, okay. And then, so what's that other line?
Now, I think you ended up using a border there, and your
Okay.
border may be on the logo and the menu divs as opposed to that row. So I'm going to let you play around with that and figure that one out on your own. That may be where you're applying your border isn't lining up with where you're applying your padding.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Very good work. That is like totally fine of what we want to see for the assignment.
Okay.
The important thing is that you're playing around, you're understanding that I need a row before I can use my columns. You're understanding different column sizes. You're taking CSS backgrounds and applying them. You're understanding the difference between classes and IDs, right? Like there's a lot that this homework assignment is testing you on, and you hit all of that, right? So it's not about like the final output that matters. It's, hey, I understand how to link my CSS, how to use properties, how to use the grid system, how to not be afraid of my HTML, make sure my indentation is right. All of those things are what I'm grading you on. And so it's tough because if you turn that into a client, the client wouldn't care about any of that. The client would care that it looks exactly like the mockup. But that's kind of 180 of what I'm grading you on. What I'm grading you on is, hey, are you comfortable with the code? Can you apply the concepts? If you can, then you're doing great.
Okay. Thank you.
So Quota, did you have a question?
Yes, like my code, can I share my screen?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I guess I'll show you my grid first. So this is what I'm not sure what I did wrong here.
Okay. You've got something, my guess, did you happen to use a container?
I think so.
Switch me over to your code in your screen share.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to request remote. So up at the top, we've got our div class container, except Bootstrap classes are always lowercase. So from here, we've got our div. And this is kind of interesting because where do we think our div is ending? Based off of indentation, we would say right here, right? Because this is the line that follows it down. But when we click on this div, look at where it says it's ending. Okay, well, there's our problem because we're not quite in the right spot. So let's see what's going on here. We open our div col3. Then we've got a div inside of it, and this div closes it. So all of that's lined up, and we're good to go. Then we've got our div col9, and we open a div, and we close the div. And then we've got this extra dangling closing div. Well, based off of the indentation, this div lines up with this closing div. So this is an entire extra div that we don't need. So if we take that one out, now all of a sudden, our div for the row lines up at the right spot. Now you've got a TD in here that I'm not sure what it's doing. So I'm going to take this one out because TDs are for tables. And now that lines up, that lines up, that lines up, that lines up, which means if we click on this closing div, it lines up with this opening div. And I think everything should be fixed. How does it look in your browser?
Okay, yeah.
So it was just that closing div that's the problem. We had an extra one in there. Mel posted a good comment in the chat. Watch out for that autocomplete. It's there to help you, but sometimes you'll get an extra div, an extra closing div that you don't want. And the best way to go through that is line by line, right? Say, all right, opening div, does this line up with the closing div? Opening div, does this line up with the closing? All right, now we've got too many closing divs. Which one of these is extra? And that can fix all of the problems.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. And we run into that. That comes with experience. Many other people will have that problem. And in fact, at least one other person doing this assignment will forget their computer is a Mac and think it's Windows because they'll want to throw it out one, right? They'll just be like, it's all fine up until here. And then all of a sudden it all breaks, right? That is all part of learning those closing divs and making sure they all line up. Very common.
Thank you.
No problem. Stick around for another couple minutes in case anyone has questions. Otherwise, you guys are welcome to head out.
Go ahead.
You're unmuted. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I don't want to take up any more time on this Friday night, but I noticed that on your calendar,
What feels like a Friday night. It's only
Oh,
Thursday.
wait, it's Thursday. I have so much on my plate.
It's fine. It's my Friday as well. It's my.
Yeah, thank you. Your calendar, you're not available until next week.
Until
After.
Monday. Yeah.
Until Monday.
Unfortunately, I don't have any availability this weekend. I'm actually traveling down to my parents' house.
Oh, fine. Okay. All right. Well, we do have Mel. Thank you.
You got Mel. Caitlin is around. She's a very helpful TA. Exona, if she's not on that spreadsheet, you can reach out to Exona. She's your TA week 1. Great at HTML, can definitely help you out. Just shoot her a Slack message. And I'm sure you can get some scheduling there. And then you can always schedule me for Monday or Tuesday and then end up canceling it if you decide you don't need it. When you get the email link from Calendly, there's like a one-click cancel. And so you can just cancel it and you don't have to shoot me a message or anything and it will disappear from my calendar. So that's another option as well.
Okay, thank you. Everyone have a great night. See you Monday.
Oh, Exona is not available. Take it back. Kenny, you want to share your screen?
Oh, shoot.
Sierra, I'll come to you next.
Yeah, I can share my screen. Snap. What am I looking at again? Desktop 1. Can you see it?
No. Hit the final share button or double click on desktop 1. There you go. Now it's coming through. Okay.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm doing like a lot of things wrong here, but I mean, I was able to get like the basic layout.
Okay. Yep. So this is looking good. Let me just pull up the assignment on my side so I know what we're shooting for. Okay, so we want to get a little bit of separation so that we can tell the difference between where our logo is ending and where our menu is starting, right? And so to pull that off, instead of applying that background color to the row itself, instead what we're going to do is we're going to apply it to the col 4 and to the col 8. And we can actually do that.
One line. I think I did that a couple of days ago too, but I don't know.
So this is going to break This is going to break your other rows, but for the first row, when we save it, oh, that did not do what I thought it was going to do. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like I messed up probably somewhere. So I'm like,
All right, let's put that back. Instead, maybe we can say, hey, at the col 4, put a border on the right side of it. That is going to be 10px solid white. There we go. There's our little gap. And we can use that same trick to say, hey, go to, let's put an ID on this of second row.
Mhm.
Then we can say, go to the second row, find the col 8, and also apply a border on the right of white. And that breaks it up a little bit. So we get that gap in there.
yeah, and okay, that makes sense. Thanks. For the side too, I noted that it pushed the border to the right as well because there's like a little white space left. But I can fix that.
Yeah. And all that matters is that you're playing around with it. So all of your HTML structure is really on point here. So I would just play around with like, how do I get the red boxes to show up down at the bottom? And then that would be totally fine to turn in. Like I said, the end goal here isn't for it to be like pixel perfect. The real goal is just making sure that you're playing around with the concepts, knowing how to structure HTML, knowing that there are different properties in the CSS. That's all that really matters. So this is like other than the red boxes, that would get full credit for turning it in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, keep up with good work. Amberlynn, what's up?
Okay, so I'm doing the quiz and I'm reading the first question in 2 ways. So like I feel like I'm answering it right, and then I read it again and it's like asking the opposite question. So
What question are you on?
number 1, but I already did the rest. Number 1, I'm reading it in a way. Okay. Which of the following elements are part of the HTML structure? Are you asking us to say what are the elements of that are in the HTML, or just the main structure?
Just the main structure.
Okay.
There are
because I'm reading it both ways. And I'm
there
like,
are three correct answers.
Okay.
If that helps.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I think the questions get shuffled, which is the only reason I asked what's the first question, because everyone gets them in a different order. But yes, there are 3 correct answers to that question. Anyone else need help before I go over to Ciara and help get in Canvas? Awesome. I'm going to stop the recording.